Tonight we drift along the dark ribbon of the Nile, where the water moves slowly under a wash of silver moonlight and the desert beyond lies like a vast, sleeping animal. The air smells faintly of wet reeds, cooling stone, and distant smoke from cooking fires. You stand on the eastern bank, sandals pressed into damp mud, watching the last streaks of orange fade behind low hills scarred by ancient quarries. Somewhere in the distance, a lamp flickers to life, then another. Tiny gold stars scattered across the earth to rival the ones overhead. You are about to spend your evening with Nubian gold miners, which sounds romantic until you remember you probably wouldn't survive a single shift swinging a stone hammer in 40-degree heat. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, tell me where you're listening from and what your local time is. I love imagining this little circle of night owls stretched across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin walking inland from the river, following a narrow path beaten flat by bare feet and donkey hooves. The Nile behind you is life itself. Its annual floods nourish fields of sorghum and barley, but ahead lies the harsher promise of gold. Ancient Nubia, particularly during the time of the Kingdom of Kush, was famed for its mineral wealth. Egyptian texts even called the region Tasseti and later Nub, a word many scholars connect to gold. That's your mainstream historical anchor for the evening. Nubian gold was real, abundant, and powerful enough to shape politics along the Nile Valley for centuries. The camp emerges gradually from shadow. Low huts made of reeds and mud brick huddle together, arranged in loose rows that follow the slope of the land. There's no grand gate, no towering walls, just the quiet murmur of tired voices and the soft clink of tools being set down for the night. You pass a stack of rounded dolerite hammerstones, their surfaces polished by countless blows against quartz veins. They look almost innocent in the lamplight, like oversized river pebbles, but you know they've been the blunt instruments of a very long day. A donkey snorts as you step around it. Someone has draped a simple cloth over its back, more for modesty than warmth. The animal blinks at you with that timeless expression that says, "I did not sign up for this," which, frankly, makes two of you. Oil lamps begin to define the camp's shape. Each one is small, shallow, and handmade, simple clay bowls pinched at one end to hold a wick. They burn with a steady, golden flame fed by oil pressed from local plants or possibly imported sesame. Historians still argue whether miners here relied mostly on animal fat or vegetable oil for their lamps, since residue analysis from similar sites offers mixed clues. Either way, the effect is the same. Trembling halos of light that soften hard faces and turn dust motes into drifting sparks. You step closer to one hut where 3 miners sit cross-legged, their backs against the wall. Their skin is coated in a fine sheen of desert dust that no amount of river water ever fully removes. One man rubs his forearms slowly, as if reminding them they belong to him. Another stares into the flame, eyes half-lidded, already halfway to sleep. The third is speaking in a low voice about a narrow shaft that nearly collapsed that afternoon. He gestures with his hands to show how tight the space was, barely wider than a body. You instinctively suck in your stomach, though it doesn't help much in imagination. The mines themselves lie a short walk uphill, dark mouths cut into stone ridges. By day, they echo with the rhythmic pounding of hammer on rock. By night, they sit in silence, exhaling faint cool air like the breath of something ancient and patient. Archaeologists have uncovered extensive gold mining complexes in the eastern desert of Sudan and southern Egypt, with tunnels sometimes stretching surprisingly deep. It's easy to picture similar shafts here, cramped, smoky from fire-setting techniques, and lit only by the same kind of lamps now glowing at your feet. A breeze lifts, carrying with it the smell of crushed stone and ash. Someone laughs softly at a joke you didn't catch, and the tension of the day loosens just a little. You realize that evening is not simply the absence of labor. It is a delicate ritual of unwinding, of reclaiming your body from the mountain. One miner lifts a small leather pouch and pours a pinch of fine dust into his palm. Gold dust. Even in the dim light, it glimmers faintly. It doesn't look like treasure. It looks like sand that went to finishing school. And yet, this unassuming shimmer will travel far beyond this camp. North toward Egypt, perhaps even melted into rings or temple offerings. There's something quietly astonishing about that. You're sitting in a place that feeds empires, and it smells mostly like donkey. A young boy, maybe 12, moves between huts carrying a clay jar of water. Child labor is not a modern invention, unfortunately. In many ancient mining communities, entire families contributed to the work, whether crushing or hauling debris or tending animals. Historians still argue whether these camps were seasonal operations staffed by free laborers or more controlled environments with enslaved workers captured in regional conflicts. The truth likely varied across time and place. Tonight, though, you simply see tired people trying to stretch a few peaceful hours out of the dark. You sit near one of the lamps, watching the flame bow and straighten with each whisper of wind. Its wick glows orange at the tip, black at the base, and you find yourself absurdly protective of it. This tiny light is everything after sunset, conversation partner, guardian, and, if you're honest, the only reason you're not tripping over a sleeping goat. Above you, the sky deepens into indigo. Stars sharpen. The Nile murmurs in the distance. Somewhere uphill, the mines wait patiently for morning. But for now, the world has narrowed to this circle of lamplight, this shared breath of evening. You feel the day's grit settling, the rhythm of the river matching your own pulse. And as another lamp flares gently to life across the camp, you sense that this quiet hour, more than the gold itself, is what truly holds the settlement together. The lamps multiply as darkness settles fully over the camp, each one claiming a small territory of comfort against the vast, patient desert. You wander farther between the huts, your feet brushing over sand that is still faintly warm from the day's heat. The miners have finished their final tasks. Stacking tools, checking rope coils, covering baskets of crushed ore, and now the settlement exhales in unison. A cooking fire crackles near the center of the camp, its flames lower and steadier than the harsh blaze used for smelting. Here the purpose is gentler. A flat stone serves as a griddle, and someone pats out rounds of sorghum dough with practiced hands. Sorghum is one of the region's staple grains, hardy, drought-resistant, dependable. It doesn't complain about poor soil or blazing sun, which makes it more resilient than most of us. You watch the dough puff slightly as it cooks, releasing a toasty scent that mixes with wood smoke and the faint mineral tang still clinging to everyone's clothes. A clay jar is passed carefully from hand to hand. Inside is a mildly fermented beer made from grain, thick, cloudy, more like a drinkable porridge than the sparkling varieties you might know. Beer in ancient Nubia, much like in Egypt, was not just a luxury but a dietary staple. Safer to drink than untreated river water and full of calories. That's your mainstream fact for this stretch of evening. Grain beer was a daily companion to laborers across the Nile Valley, sustaining them through heat and hardship. You accept the jar in imagination and take a cautious sip. It's sour, earthy, unexpectedly filling. Not exactly what you'd order at a trendy microbrewery, but after hours underground, you suspect it tastes like relief itself. A woman kneels beside a woven mat, sorting small fragments of or by lamplight. She works with quiet precision, separating promising quartz pieces from worthless rock. Women's labor in mining communities often goes underrecorded in official inscriptions, which tend to glorify kings and generals instead. Yet archaeological evidence from similar sites suggests that women and children frequently helped crush or and wash sediments to extract gold particles. You notice her hands are callous too. Gold, it seems, is a family business. Someone begins humming, a low, repetitive melody that loops gently like the Nile's current. It's not a performance, just a habit, something to keep thoughts from drifting too far into worry. You sit near the edge of the group, watching silhouettes move against lamplit walls. A man stretches out his legs with a soft groan and jokes that tomorrow he plans to mine only the easy gold. Laughter ripples softly. Yes, the famously abundant supply of easy gold, just lying around waiting to be scooped up. If only. Beyond the firelight, the desert presses close. During the day it feels harsh and blinding. At night it becomes immense and almost tender. The temperature drops quickly now, and a few miners pull simple linen cloaks around their shoulders. Linen, woven from flax, was common along the Nile for its breathability and lightness. Though finer linen marked wealth, even working communities relied on it for daily wear. The fabric rustles quietly as people shift and settle. You glance uphill toward the dark ridge where the mine entrances wait. In some gold mining operations of the ancient world, miners used a technique called fire setting, heating rock with intense fire, then rapidly cooling it with water to crack the stone. Traces of soot and fractured surfaces at certain Nubian and Egyptian sites suggest similar methods might have been used here. Historians still argue whether fire setting was widespread in this particular region or reserved for especially stubborn veins, but the blackened stone in some excavated shafts hints at its smoky presence. The thought of spending hours underground with nothing but a flickering lamp and a stone hammer makes you flex your fingers unconsciously. You probably wouldn't last a full afternoon without negotiating for ergonomic tools and a lunch break policy. The miners, meanwhile, treat it as ordinary reality. A pair of children chase each other briefly between huts before being called back by a sharp but not unkind voice. Evenings are for winding down, not stirring up dust clouds. One child carries a small clay figurine, crudely shaped, perhaps a protective charm. Quirky tidbit for the night. Small household figurines, sometimes representing deities or spirits, have been found in Nile Valley settlements, suggesting that daily life was sprinkled with personal acts of devotion outside grand temples. Whether every camp had such charms is uncertain, but it would hardly be surprising. You sit closer to one lamp as a breeze flutters its flame sideways. The wick trembles, then steadies. Oil lamps in this era were simple but ingenious, portable suns that extended productivity and conversation beyond sunset. Without them, evening would collapse into darkness almost instantly. With them, the camp gains a second life, softer but no less important. A miner begins recounting a story from his youth. Something about a cousin who claimed to find a nugget the size of a pigeon's egg. The others groan affectionately. There is always someone who knows someone who found an impossibly large piece of gold. Historians still argue whether ancient textual references to massive nuggets were exaggerated for royal propaganda or based on rare but genuine discoveries. Either way, the story has clearly grown in the retelling. You lean back on your hands and let the murmur of voices blur into a comforting hum. The day's urgency has drained away, replaced by something slower. A rhythm forms. Sip, chew, stretch, sigh. Above, the stars multiply until the sky feels crowded. A final round of flatbread is passed around. Someone carefully wraps leftover pieces in cloth for the morning. The fire burns lower now, and conversations shrink to quieter pairs. A man traces absent-minded patterns in the sand with a stick, perhaps thinking of family in a nearby village along the Nile's greener banks. You notice how the camp, though modest, has its own choreography. Tools stacked here, water jars there, sleeping mats unrolled in the same order each night. There is comfort in repetition. Gold mining may shape empires, but routine shapes survival. As you settle onto a woven mat yourself, close enough to feel the lamp's warmth but far enough to avoid singeing your hair, always a plus. You realize that this hour is the true treasure. The mountain may hold gold, but the camp holds something steadier. Shared endurance under flickering light. The last laughter fades into murmurs. The oil lamps continue their quiet vigil, small suns holding back the dark just a little longer. The camp grows quieter, but sleep does not claim everyone at once. You find yourself sitting beside one of the older miners, his posture relaxed yet alert, as though years of listening to shifting stone have trained him never to fully surrender to silence. He gestures vaguely toward the dark hills where the gold veins run like hidden threads through the rock. It is easy, in this circle of lamplight, to forget that the dust clinging to everyone's sandals once shaped kingdoms. Nubia, particularly during the height of the Kingdom of Kush, was renowned across the ancient world for its gold deposits. Egyptian records from as early as the New Kingdom mention expeditions southward in search of precious metal. In fact, Egypt's wealth during certain periods relied heavily on gold extracted from Nubian territories. That's your solid, mainstream historical anchor here. Nubian gold was not a rumor or legend. It was a cornerstone of regional power and diplomacy. You imagine envoys traveling north with sealed jars of gold dust, guarded carefully along the Nile's steady current. That same river you heard murmuring earlier becomes a kind of conveyor belt for empire. Gold mined by tired hands under oil lamps might end up hammered into amulets, burial masks, or diplomatic gifts exchanged between rulers who never once set foot in this dusty camp. The older miner speaks quietly about tribute. He doesn't use the word the way modern historians do, but the meaning lingers in his tone. There are expectations, quotas, deliveries. When Kushite rulers were strong, they controlled these resources directly. When Egyptian influence extended southward, oversight could shift. The Nile Valley was not a static political map but a dynamic frontier. Historians still argue whether control of certain gold fields fluctuated frequently or remained relatively stable under Kushite authority for long stretches. Archaeological evidence, forts, inscriptions, administrative seals, offers clues, but the full picture remains debated. You watch as he reaches into a small leather pouch and lets a few grains of gold dust slide through his fingers. They catch the lamplight with soft brilliance. Gold's appeal is almost absurdly simple. It does not tarnish, it bends without breaking, and it glows like captured sunlight. No wonder ancient cultures associated it with divinity and immortality. A younger miner nearby jokes that if gold truly belonged to the gods could come down and dig it themselves. A few tired chuckles follow. It's a light remark, but it carries a quiet truth. Those who praise gold most often are rarely the ones hauling stone from underground shafts. You shift your gaze toward the hills again, imagining the geological forces that placed these veins here in the first place. Long before kingdoms, before language as you know it, mineral-rich fluids moved through cracks in ancient bedrock, cooling into quartz streaked with flecks of metal. It is strange to think that tectonic patience millions of years old now determines tonight's sore shoulders. One of the men mentions a story passed down from his grandfather, that the hills themselves guard the gold, and that removing too much too quickly angers the spirits of the stone. It's the kind of belief that sounds poetic in hindsight. Quirky tidbit for the evening. In several ancient mining cultures, not only in Nubia but across the Mediterranean, workers left small offerings at mine entrances, sometimes food, sometimes simple carvings, as a gesture of respect or appeasement. Whether every Nubian gold site practiced this is uncertain, but archaeologists have indeed uncovered small ritual deposits in mining areas throughout the ancient world. The conversation drifts to stories of distant cities. Napata, Meroe, names spoken with a mix of pride and abstraction. The Kushite capital at Meroe, flourishing centuries later, became famous for its iron production and pyramids. Yes, pyramids in Nubia, often steeper and narrower than their Egyptian cousins. Gold wealth likely supported aspects of this architectural ambition. You picture slender pyramids rising from desert plains, funded in part by evenings just like this one. A gust of wind pushes sand lightly against your ankles. The lamp flame leans, steadies, leans again. You realize how vulnerable this whole operation is. No electric light, no reinforced tunnels. Just human coordination and hope. And yet it persists. The older miner points toward the Nile again, now barely visible in darkness. Trade routes branch from it like arteries. Gold could move north to Egypt, yes, but also eastward toward the Red Sea and beyond. Some scholars propose that Nubian gold entered broader trade networks reaching the Levant and perhaps even farther afield. Historians still argue about the scale of this exchange, since written documentation is uneven and often filtered through Egyptian records. Still, the possibility lingers. The dust clinging to these men's hands tonight might someday cross deserts and seas. You feel a flicker of something almost philosophical. Gold is valued because it endures, because it resists corrosion. Meanwhile, the hands that extract it age, wrinkle, and eventually disappear. The irony is gentle but persistent. A younger boy approaches with a shallow wooden bowl filled with crushed quartz. He kneels beside a woman who begins grinding it finer using a stone pestle. The rhythmic scraping blends with the soft murmur of conversation. Gold extraction often required repeated crushing and washing to separate the heavier metal particles from lighter debris. Even after hours underground, the work continues above ground in smaller, meticulous motions. The older miner stretches and rises slowly, joints cracking like distant twigs. He mutters something about the king's appetite never being satisfied. Another man quips that at least the king doesn't personally show up to inspect their hammer swings. There's that dry humor again. Small sparks in the dark. Above, the constellations sharpen. You recognize Orion's belt, though here it carries a different story, a different name. The same stars shine on royal courts and humble camps alike, indifferent to hierarchy. You realize that this settlement, modest as it seems, is a hinge between geology and empire. Without these quiet evenings, without these tired conversations under oil lamps, there would be no gold flowing northward, no gilded temples catching the sunrise. The lamp beside you sputters softly as the oil runs lower. Someone leans forward to trim the wick with careful fingers. The flame steadies once more, and in its glow you understand that this is not merely a mining camp. It is a small, beating heart in the long story of Kush, steady, persistent, and illuminated by fragile but determined light. The night has deepened, and most of the camp is settling into stillness, but your mind drifts stubbornly uphill, toward the mine entrances carved into the ridge like dark doorways. You can almost feel the cool breath that leaks from them even after sunset, the mountain exhaling slowly, as if it has been holding its breath all day while men chipped away at its bones. A miner nearby notices your gaze and gives a tired little shrug that says, "Yes, that's where we were. No, it wasn't fun. Thanks for asking." He doesn't actually say it out loud, but his expression is eloquent enough. After a moment, you rise and follow a small group walking toward the slopes.